He still has the gun. The gun is pointed at me right at this moment. I hope they can get the gun out of his hand. Be very careful. Get the gun. Get the gun. Get the gun. Stay away from the gun. Get the gun. Stay away from the gun. His hand is frozen. Get his thumb. Get his thumb. Get his thumb. Take a hold of his thumb and break it if you have to. Get his thumb. Hold him. Hold him. Hold him. Hold him, Ripper. We don't want another Oswald.
The original death of RFK is shrouded with cover-up lies and corruption. This is a collection of evidence I've gathered that proves beyond reasonable doubt that there was a conspiracy to kill Robert F. Kennedy.
What has violence ever accomplished? What has it ever created? No martyr's cause has ever been stilled by an assassin's bullet. No wrongs have ever been righted by riots and civil disorders. A sniper is only a coward, not a hero.
Violence, the disenchantment with our society.
Robert F. Kennedy, often referred to as RFK, was a prominent American politician and a member of the Kennedy family. He served as the 64th United States Attorney General from 1961 to 1964 and as a U.S. Senator from New York from 1965 until his death in 1968.
Remembered simply as a good and decent man who saw wrong and tried to right it, saw suffering and tried to heal it, saw war and tried to stop it.
RFK was known for his advocacy for civil rights, social justice, and opposition to the Vietnam War. On the night of June 5, 1968, RFK was at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, California, celebrating his win in the Democratic primary, a crucial win for his campaign for the presidential nomination. After delivering an uplifting victory speech to an enthusiastic crowd in the hotel's ballroom, RFK, accompanied by his entourage, headed towards the press conference through the kitchen pantry. As he made his way through the pantry, shaking hands and thanking his supporters, a young man named Sirhan Sirhan emerged from the group. Sirhan, a 24-year-old Palestinian, approached Kennedy closely in the chaotic and crowded pantry. Sirhan pulled out a .22 revolver and fired multiple shots at close range. Robert F. Kennedy was struck by 3 bullets with a 4th bullet passing through his jacket. The most critical wound was a shot that entered behind his right ear, causing severe brain damage. Several others were also injured in the shooting, including Kennedy's campaign aide, Paul Schrade. The panic erupted in the pantry as people realized what had happened and tried to wrestle the gun from Sirhan. Despite the immediate efforts of his medical team and the fast arrival of emergency services, Kennedy's condition rapidly deteriorated. He was rushed to the nearby Good Samaritan Hospital, where doctors worked tirelessly to save his life. Unfortunately, the damage was too extensive. Robert F. Kennedy succumbed to his injuries in the early hours of June 6, 1968, just over 24 hours after he was shot. He was 42 years old. Sirhan Sirhan was arrested at the scene and later convicted of first-degree murder. He was initially sentenced to death, but his sentence was commuted to life in prison in 1972 after California abolished the death penalty.
Into the hotel kitchen, into the range of a young, swarthy assailant. The senator was hit by 2 bullets. 5 other persons were also wounded as bullets sprayed the kitchen. Only the senator was critically hurt. Police later identified the alleged assailant as 24-year-old Sirhan Sirhan, a native Jordanian who came to this country 11 years ago.
The bullet that killed RFK was fired from his right backside at an upward angle. No witness in the vicinity stated that Sirhan was closer than 3 to 4 feet, with most saying around 6 feet. The way Kennedy was standing, facing Sirhan, makes it impossible for Sirhan to have shot him in that manner. Witnesses said the gunfire sounded like a machine gun. They said they had a hard time believing it was from one gun.
Away from Kennedy's head, because he was across the room on this ice thing, and the room, I don't know the dimensions of the room, but he was not an inch away.
The closest anybody ever put the gun, who saw the gun at all, was 18 inches. Most people put it 3, 4, 5, 6 feet away.
The bullet which killed Kennedy, it was an inch away from his head. This bullet didn't come from Sirhan.
The medical evidence documented by Dr. Thomas Noguchi, the coroner who conducted the autopsy, showed that the fatal shots came from behind and 1 inch away from Robert F. Kennedy. This automatically shows that Sirhan could not have shot him, but this is only the first thing. Dr. Noguchi wrote a book on it, calling it the perfect autopsy because it was. He was supervised by many different experts and professionals during the autopsy. He saw what happened to JFK's body in the government and the media. He didn't allow it to happen to RFK. They didn't allow Dr. Thomas Noguchi to testify in the trial, and they ran a smear campaign against him for what he said in the autopsy. He was then abruptly fired from his job.
Found behind the right ear, and it showed the direction to be upward, back to front, and of course to the right to left direction. So if I may just use my finger to illustrate, it will be like this. There were abundance of a powder deposit on the edge of the right ear, and after testifying the similar weapon, we came to conclusion that the muzzle distance would be a 1 inch from the right ear edge and no more than 3 inches.
He never had the opportunity to elaborate on his astounding findings. His testimony was cut short. In fact, soon after, Dr. Noguchi was fired and accused of being derelict in his performance of the Robert Kennedy autopsy.
Sirhan fired 2 bullets, one hitting a man and another hitting a frame behind RFK. He was then abruptly subdued and fired 6 more shots, which are all accounted for, hitting 5 different people. With 2 long shots lodging in the ceiling and 2 in the frame, that gives us 9 shots, not accounting for the 4 that hit RFK. How was this possible with a 9-shot revolver? It's not. Multiple experts have examined the audio recordings of the note and have determined 10 to 13 shots were fired.
Well, there were 13 shot sounds that I found on that recording, up to the point where the screams just totally overrode all of the other audio.
This confirms witness reports who said they heard 2 shots, then a pause, and then all hell broke loose.
Police knew that they could not discover any bullets on the crime scene because 7 bullets were taken from victims and an 8th was supposedly lost in the ceiling. Any evidence of additional shots would confirm that multiple shooters were involved because the capacity of the so-called Sirhan revolver was 8 shots. Previously undisclosed FBI photographs confirmed there were bullet holes in the pantry door frames. These were circled by an LA Sheriff's Department deputy. The FBI labeled these as bullet holes. There were witnesses that the police criminalists were digging out bullets from the door frame. Those bullets never materialized. They were never disclosed. The LAPD removed the door frames and ceiling panels and destroyed them before Sirhan's appeal even got off the ground.
I saw 2 bullet holes in a center divider. I saw 2 bullets in the holes. I have serious reservations whether or not any of Bobby's wounds were inflicted by Sirhan's gun.
Archivist for the California State Archives makes a stunning announcement.
As the documents show, the police did dispose of physical evidence, the door jambs and ceiling tiles from the crime scene. Among missing photographic items are those relating directly to crime scene studies, ballistics examinations, and witness reenactments.
Those things that had no evidentiary value, those are some of the things that were destroyed.
There's a real explanation for it, except that you need room, and so you say, hey, we don't need these anymore, let's dump them. And people dump them. Most people, unless you're a real string saver, you go through your garage and say, I got to get rid of some of this junk.
The
The only way that you can jibe what the coroner said, what the LAPD said in its crime scene examination, what the eyewitnesses say they saw, the only way you can jibe all of that is that there was a second guy firing a gun in that pantry that night. This is the FBI's photograph from the scene and their accompanying caption from the June 8, 1968 FBI report. E2, a close-up view of the 2 bullet holes of area described above. Here's E2, and these are the 2 bullet holes as the FBI describes them. Not alleged bullet holes, bullet holes. E3, close-up view of 2 bullet holes, which is located in center door frame inside kitchen serving area in the direction of the backstage area. This is photograph 3, again, FBI, the bullet holes themselves. Not reported bullet holes, bullet holes. These interviews are authentic, they are on the record, and many of them are on tape. And what I did was I basically asked these officers 2 questions. What did you do that night, and what did you see? These officers had no idea of the significance of what they were telling me. They were giving me direct responses to my direct questions. And about 20 of the people I talked to had clearly identified bullets, bullet fragments, or bullet holes at the crime scene itself in the kitchen pantry. The detective who was there told me that he had seen, quote, quite a few bullet holes and actually identified the location of 1 bullet in the wall which corresponded with an FBI photograph.
In the spring of 1992, a petition was brought before the Los Angeles County Grand Jury requesting the appointment of a special prosecutor to investigate the Los Angeles Police Department for willful and corrupt misconduct in its investigation of the murder of Robert Kennedy. This request was signed by over 50 notables, including Arthur Schlesinger Jr., Frank Mankiewicz, Norman Mailer, Sam Dash, Cesar Chavez, and Oliver Stone. It was accompanied by 800 pages of exhibits documenting the LAPD's destruction of evidence, falsification of evidence, and coercion of witnesses. Whether this request will ever be adequately acted upon is uncertain.
That the suspect and another man are in custody, and until we confirm that we have the correct suspect, well, obviously we have to assume that we do not have them.
Sirhan was not given a fair trial. His lawyer decided to fight on the basis that Sirhan was mentally ill and in a hypnotic trance. He didn't even try to dispute the evidence in the trial, such as the gun that was allegedly used in the shooting was examined by a ballistic expert who said it was the same gun that killed RFK. One of the serial numbers of the gun he tested as Sirhan's gun did not match up. Not only did this prove the expert was willing to lie, it destroys the credibility of the LAPD investigation. There was no chain of custody on this gun, which in a real trial would be inadmissible.
Wayne Wolfer, the criminals for the LAPD crime lab, had drawn the conclusion that the bullets recovered were fired from Sirhan's gun, and it turned out that he examined a gun that had a different serial number than Sirhan.
In 1975, a panel was formed. The panel was created solely to examine ballistic evidence. The panel inventoried all the bullets they received from the LAPD, documenting all existing markings. The test bullet, supposedly from Sirhan's gun, should have had a specific marking, but it didn't. The Kennedy neck bullet, retrieved fairly intact, should have had the base marked with the coroner's initials and the case number TN31. However, the 1975 panel found the base marked with DWTN, indicating it wasn't the same bullet. Dwayne Wolfer, DWTN, apparently didn't check the original markings on the bullet. Interestingly, the photomicrograph of the supposed test bullet, which didn't come from Sirhan, revealed it was actually the Goldstein bullet, Ira Goldstein, who was wounded in the pantry, which should have had his bullet marked with an X by the doctor who retrieved it. Yet the bullet examined by the panel had no such marking.
My son was really upset. He was hurt and he couldn't stand it. He said, he stood in the courtroom and he said, "Please, Your Honor, I have to say something. I don't want these lawyers to defend me," because he knew that they are not defending him right. And you know, even the judge, he was so hard. I am so sorry to say this. But he said, look here, fellow, you have to sit down and keep quiet, or else I put a mask on your face and I tie you in your chair. So you cannot defend yourself.
Grant Cooper also worked with Johnny Roselli, who was connected to the Friars Club place, who also connected to the racetrack Sirhan worked at. Sirhan's lawyer received the lowest punishment for stealing a grand jury testimony in the Friars Club case. This suggests it might have been a reward for getting a conviction on Sirhan. So after all this, you may ask who did it. It was Thane Eugene Caesar, the polka-dot dress girl, and another man. This is the evidence. Thane Caesar was a last-minute replacement, as Kennedy's bodyguard could not work that day. Thane Caesar was a self-described CIA agent who in a previous job was working at Lockheed with a top-secret clearance. The kitchen was constantly unguarded, the part where Thane Caesar was supposed to guard. Lisa Pease explains.
Recently that various parts of the hotel were guarded by different guards. Thane Eugene Caesar was one of several guards hired by the hotel through a security. A security had like 8 or 10 guys there that night. And different guards were being very good at their posts and checking people's ID and only letting certain people in. But for whatever reason, the kitchen was constantly unguarded, and one of the Kennedy staffers is complaining to the police in the files about how she had to keep shooing people out of the kitchen. No one was supposed to be there except press people, or certainly Robert Kennedy and his immediate, attendants. But the person who was charged with guarding the kitchen door was Thane Eugene Caesar. So, I mean, if you wanted to have a guy, in there to make sure Sirhan got into the room, because frankly, if your patsy doesn't get in the pantry, the whole plot is off, right?
Thane Caesar would have been in the perfect position to shoot Kennedy and is the only person who could have shot Robert F. Kennedy. Thane Caesar said he didn't shoot his gun on the night, but witnesses claim they saw a security guard shoot their gun.
I was in the pantry following the senator. He stopped and shook hands with several people and started to progress again. We were packed in there like sardines. There were lights and cameras and people and a lot of excitement. The senator just finished shaking hands with someone, and another man, I think it was the maitre d', walked up and took his hand. As we were slowly pushed forward, another man stepped out and he shot. Just then the guard who was standing behind Kennedy took out his gun and he fired also. The next thing I knew is that Kennedy was shot 3 times.
Now, how far was Sirhan from Senator Kennedy at the time?
I would say approximately from 3 to 6 feet.
Where was this guard who was firing his gun?
He was standing directly to the side and back of Kennedy.
On what side?
He was standing on the right-hand side.
Now, Don, did you tell this story to any police authorities?
I told the story to several different people, including several police authorities. Right after it happened, I insisted the senator was shot 3 times. I was told by the police.
Which police?
Well, I was told by the FBI that I was told by the FBI, my own news people, that I was mistaken, that I was wrong. The senator was only shot twice.
Now, when you say your own news people, who do you mean?
Well, I was on the air with Jerry Dunphy. Also, I did a tape recording with Jeff Brent. And several people I told. In fact, I also told them that the guard pulled out the gun, and everyone told me that in the confusion I didn't see what I saw. Well, I didn't see everything that happened that night because of the blinding lights and the people screaming, but the things that I did see, I'm sure about. And that is Kennedy being shot 3 times. The guard definitely pulled out his gun and fired.
Now, when you say Jeff Brent, he is with the Continental News Service. When did he interview you?
Well, right after the assassination attempt and all the confusion, I fought my way out of the pantry, and I was heading towards a telephone to call CBS News. Before I picked up the phone, Jeff Brent, who grabbed me and asked me right on the spot exactly what I had seen then, fresh in my mind.
I was about 6 people behind the senator. I heard about 6 or 7 shots in succession. Now, is this the security guard firing back?
Yes, the man who stepped out fired 3 times at Kennedy, hit him all 3 times, and the security guards then fired back.
Then the tape we played is authentic?
It is. It was given I'd say 10 to 15 minutes after all the incidents of the evening.
Now, I'm showing you this story. Can you identify it for us? It's a lead story in the Boston Record-American. It's dated June the 5th, 1968.
Yes, this was sent to me by the newspaper, and the account which is in the paper was the same account I was telling everyone else of the senator being shot 3 times and of the guard firing.
Did the Los Angeles Police Department, the Special Unit Senator, ever conduct a face-to-face taped or written interview with you?
They did contact me at CBS as they did everyone else, but as soon as I told them what I told you earlier, they weren't interested in me.
My wife, Rowena, who acted as my legal aid throughout the hearing, which, as you know, resulted in Dr. Noguchi's being completely cleared of all the charges and reinstated as coroner, received a call from a lady who, in fact, made an appointment to come to our home and who wanted to speak with us because she had been at the Ambassador that night, and she herself had seen a security guard firing.
The lady did not show up, and it was impossible to trace her and verify her story.
If you look at the bottom left of this picture, you can see Thane Caesar's tie. How did his tie come off? Well, Robert Kennedy fell on top of him and ripped his tie off as they were falling to the ground. Why would Kennedy do this? It was his last conscious act to show who the murderer was because he knew it came from his right backside. Thane Caesar can be seen later in the night without his tie on. Also, Caesar's gun was never tested on the night of the shooting. His .38 was never tested. Thane Caesar stated he sold his .22 3 months before the shooting, the same gun that killed Kennedy, but this was proven to be false with the receipt.
It proves that it was sold after the assassination. The person who made out this receipt confirmed Caesar told him at the time of the sale, "Be careful of this weapon, it was involved in a police shooting." He was the obvious first suspect. The police brushed him off and never investigated him further.
Enough, Caesar requested not to be called to testify. What was really surprising is that the court granted his wish. Shortly afterwards, Caesar disappeared from sight and went to live in the Philippines.
Less than 3 months after Houghton's unsuccessful search for a right-winger in the pantry, security guard Thane Eugene Caesar was telling reporter Ted Chirac,
I definitely wouldn't have voted for Bobby Kennedy because he had the same ideas as John did, and I think John sold the country down the road. He gave it to the commies, he gave it to whoever he wanted to, he literally gave it to the minority.
Again, there are variances between Caesar's answers to the DA and to Chirac.
I'm not a Democrat.
Yeah.
So it had nothing to do with that. I was going down there just for the money.
Now, who did you vote for in November?
Wallace.
Pardon me?
George Wallace.
Have you worked actively into the third party?
I did over in Simi when I lived in Simi Valley. I worked for George Wallace Party.
Prior to June the 5th?
Mm-hmm.
What did you do exactly?
Oh, I pass handbills and get donations. That's not too much. I didn't have too much time to put into it, but I did put a little bit of time in it.
So how does Thane Caesar become Robert Kennedy's personal security guard? Robert Mayhew is your answer. Robert Mayhew was a CIA operative involved in black ops and assassination since the 1940s. He joined the Hughes Organization in 1954 and became a chief controlling Hughes Nevada operations. In 1975, he confessed to the Church Committee investigating CIA atrocities that in 1960 he had met with mobster Johnny Roselli on behalf of CIA Director Alan Dulles to assassinate Cuban leader Fidel Castro. Dulles was fired by JFK in 1961 for attempts to draw the U.S. into a war with Cuba. John Mayer, the number 2 man in the Hughes Organization, has put on record that Mayhew carried out the assassination.
I'm John Mayer, former advisor to the recluse billionaire Howard Hughes. Among my acquaintances at that time were members of the Nixon family, Vice President Hubert Humphrey, head of the FBI J. Edgar Hoover, Paul Schrade, who was shot at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles along with Robert Kennedy, Harry Evans, who was 6 feet away from Kennedy when Kennedy was shot, and numerous others that are pertinent to this tragic event. The Hughes Organization was involved in the assassination of Robert Kennedy in 19...
Mayer once quoted J. Edgar Hoover, the first director of the FBI, saying, "We know this was a Mayhew job, but I'm powerless against the CIA." The CIA was known to have blackmail on J. Edgar Hoover. Robert F. Kennedy was against Richard Nixon in the 1968 presidential race. Nixon lost his previous bid for the presidency against John F. Kennedy in 1960. Nixon was a longtime Hughes associate, and it was well known that Hughes had even given Nixon's brother, Don Nixon, a huge loan to start a chain of fast food restaurants. In return, Nixon had used his powers as vice president to get Hughes's aerospace company to be run through Hughes Medical Institute as a charity and therefore not subject to taxation, saving Hughes untold millions of dollars. John Mayer had met with Kennedy shortly before his death, and Kennedy had told him he knew what was happening regarding the Hughes Medical Institute and was going to expose it. Mayer had kept a diary from his Hughes days that he released in a book called Age of Secrets. The book was heavily censored and essentially buried. The breakthroughs in his diary reveal the role of the Hughes organization in Robert Kennedy's murder. A short excerpt from Mayer's diary reads, October 25, 1969. My friends and I were talking to the presidency all day. We also visited the president's beach house. On the yacht, I sat stunned as Don Nixon, after many drinks, started talking about RFK's assassination. He mentioned his brother being in Texas when JFK was assassinated, and Bob Mayhew telling Don about his involvement in RFK's murder in Las Vegas. Mayhew took credit for the RFK murder. The ones that sat around the table with their mouths open were shocked. John Mayer's diary excerpt continues. During June 13, 1968, I was listening to the radio where they were discussing RFK's assassination and who was shot. They mentioned Thane Eugene Caesar, who was a security guard at the hotel working for Ace Guard Security, and who was also employed by Lockheed Aircraft. I remembered Thane from his trips to Vegas, where he was meeting with numerous gaming people and was introduced to me by Jack Hooper, an associate of Robert Mayhew. June 14, 1968, Bob Mayhew called me and told me to come over to his house at 8:30 p.m. that evening, and I did. He was furious and he wanted to know why I was checking up on Thane. I was stunned at his anger, and he said to me if I keep discussing this matter, he would see that I was no longer around the Hughes operation. He then told me he was responsible for all security matters in Nevada, and that he would personally handle Paul Schrade, a witness to the RFK murder. June 15, 1968. Received a call from Jack Hooper. He told me that he was speaking with Bob Mayer and I was never to mention his name or Bel Air Patrol. He told me that Mayhew wanted to speak to me. After we spoke, I called Mayhew 15 minutes or later. Bob wanted to impress upon me that he was in charge of the Nevada operations, that everything I did in Nevada involved Hughes, he was to be informed about. On June 16, 1968, at 5 a.m., Bob Mayer called me to ask about a Don Nixon meeting that suggested 8:30 a.m. for breakfast at the Desert Inn Country Club. I went to the club, Mayhew was all smiles, and Don Nixon walked in all smiles. But what happened next had to be seen to be believed. They embraced each other, and Don Nixon said, "Well, that prick is dead." And Mayhew who said, "Well, it looks like your brother is in now." At the time, I didn't even know what they were talking about. Mayhew joked they should be calling Don Nixon Mr. Vice President. Thane Caesar, who would eventually flee to the Philippines, was found to not only have worked at Lockheed Aircraft, but in their elite Skunk Works division, well known for UFO research.
To the best CIA mind control programmers. The jaw-dropping detail that Mayhew operative Johnny Roselli was co-owner of the Santa Anita racetrack that employed Sirhan suggests that Mayhew had Roselli find the patsy to be programmed for the RFK assassination. Sirhan, being introverted and highly suggestible, made an ideal candidate. Sirhan would disappear for months, with no contact to family and friends, just before his strange appearance at the Ambassador Hotel.
The investigators bullied and intimidated Sandra Serrano, a witness who claimed a woman in a polka dot dress and a man came out, running on the stairs saying, "We killed him, we killed him." They told her she was lying and made her change her story. Many other people recall seeing and talking to this polka dot dress girl. David Morales, who pressured Sandra Serrano into changing his story about the polka dot lady, was known to administer tests in South America and Vietnam. suggesting ties to the CIA, Morales, drunk, pretended to friends, "I was in Dallas when we got that motherfucker, and I was in Los Angeles when we got to the little bastard."
He what you call 100% American all the way through. You don't mess with him and he'll blow your ass apart.
Morales was a legendary backstreet operator for the CIA. If you saw him on the streets of a South American capital, you knew a coup was about to happen.
That's when the terrorists took over for 3.5 years. They went from door to door. Vive aquí Juan Perez, as soon as they opened the door, you had to kill children, old man, anybody that's there got killed, right down the line. All these holy people that think it by talking to people you're going to get it done, you got to kill them.
He was striding around the room and he was out of control. And I don't ever recall seeing him lose it like that before.
And what was his actual comment then that finished that?
It was something like, I was in Dallas when we got that motherfucker, and I was in Los Angeles when we got the little bastard. What it said to me was that he was in some way implicated with the death of John Kennedy. And let's go one step further, and also Bobby.
Standing there just thinking about how many people there were and how wonderful it was. Then this girl came running down the stairs in the back, and said, "We've shot him, we've shot him." And I says, "Who did you shoot?" And she says, "We shot Senator Kennedy." A boy came down with her. He was about 23 years old, and he was Mexican-American, because I can remember that because I'm Mexican-American. She had on a white dress with polka dots. She was light-skinned, dark hair, and she has a funny nose. I thought it was really funny. All my friends tell me I'm so observant.
No, Sandy. Remember what I told you about that? You can't say you saw something when you didn't see it. Sandy, look, I can explain this to the investigators where you don't even have to talk to them, and they won't talk to you. I can do this. But please, in the name of Kennedy.
I've never seen a girl.
No, I'm talking about what you have told here about saying a person tells you we have shot Kennedy, and that's wrong. No, it isn't, Sandy. Look, I love this man, and you're shaming right now, if he can't even... Well, I'm trying not to shout, but this is a very emotional thing with me, too, you see. If you love the man, the least you owe him is a courtesy of letting him rest in peace.
And the woman related that her and her husband were outside the embassy room when a young couple in their late teens or early 20s, the girl wearing a polka dot dress, came running by them shouting, "We shot him, we shot him, we killed him." And the older woman asked, "Who did you shoot?" And the young woman said, "Kennedy, we shot him, we killed him." And then the two of them ran off, just real happy, real joyful.
Schraga took the names and addresses of the couple he remembers as the Bernsteins and immediately put out an all-points bulletin on the two people they described. He wrote a report in triplicate with this information and sent it to headquarters. Schraga's APB would soon be canceled over his objections. His reports would vanish.
A couple of weeks later, I went to refer to him for one reason or another, and they were all missing. And I asked one of the day watch sergeants if he knew anything about it, and he stated that 2 SUS men had been there that day and cleaned out all the reports. I called them. They denied that they'd even been there. Then apparently they felt they had to make another report, and they made a false interview report which stated that they interviewed me, and I had retracted my statements about "we shot him" to "they shot him." I never was interviewed. I never contradicted my first two statements, but nevertheless, apparently they thought that the reports would not be scrutinized or subject to scrutiny.
Realtor George Green and journalist Booker Griffin were not together at the Ambassador Hotel, but they tell the same story.
I saw Sirhan and a lady and another gentleman consistently throughout the evening. There was a girl in a black and white dress involved with Sirhan.
She was tall, statuesque, black hair, well built. I did notice that.
I remember that she had on a polka dot dress.
Named John Fahey. He claims to have spent the day with a girl who later became known as the girl in the polka dot dress. This girl predicted the killing of Senator Kennedy not only as to the date, but to the exact occasion on which it would occur. A team of investigators composed of Jordan Bonfanti, Bureau Chief for Life magazine in Los Angeles, and myself set out to verify the story of John Fahey. We were fortunate enough to be able to confirm an important portions of that story. We further went on and gave the man a polygraph test, a lie detector test, on which the man passed with flying colors. The description given by Fahey of this woman was so detailed that we were able to get a police artist to make a composite. This portrait was later on shown to Vincent DiPiero. Vincent DiPiero had seen the girl in the polka dot dress a few minutes prior to the shooting in the company of Sirhan Sirhan. He immediately identified the girl in the polka dot dress in our portrait as being the girl that was with Sirhan. Now, that girl's description was identical to the description given by many people.
The LAPD claimed to have found the polka dot dress lady. This was a lady named Valerie Schultz, who was blonde and wearing a green dress. She looked nothing like the person described by witnesses in a black and white dress with brown or black hair. Also, another interesting detail, a woman named Kathy Fulmer, 23, was found to have committed suicide a week after the assassination. Miss Fulmer came forward to investigators as they were seeking a girl who wore a polka dot dress.
We lost complete radio communication for a period of 40 to 45 minutes. Something was very strange. It never happened before. At present, there's no question in my mind that elements of the CIA were involved. Two of the officers, Lieutenant Pena and Hank Hernandez, and the LAPD had retired some years before and gone to work for a government agency that was later found to be front for the CIA, and then almost as if by magic they showed up and were at the Emergency Control Center within a very short time after the assassination.
A document has revealed that the CIA was actively monitoring Robert Kennedy and had two operatives present at the Ambassador Hotel. Investigative journalist Shane O'Sullivan's research highlighted the presence of three men identified as former CIA operatives at the hotel: George Joanides, David Morales, and Gordon Campbell. Lieutenant Manuel Pena, a key figure in charge of the investigation, left the LAPD shortly before the assassination to work in South America for USAID, a widely known CIA front. Shortly before the assassination, he came back to the LAPD and was given command of the Special Division Investigation Squad in charge of conspiracies. Lisa Pease explains.
It's really interesting that Manny Pena is the one trying to shut that avenue down, because he's also the one that's directly connected to the CIA. And he was also the choke point of the investigation. There's a flow chart that shows kind of the routing of information through SUS. And it starts at this desk, and then it goes here, and then it goes here. And at some point it gets to Manny Pena's desk. And he has sole authority to determine what got further, investigated and what got shut down. And he had worked for AID, the Agency for International Development, which was a well-known CIA cover agency providing cover to the CIA. And also, his brother was on TV saying how much Manny Pena enjoyed his years of service to the CIA. So it's pretty well established that, he was not just an LA police officer. He was a CIA operative. So very interesting that he would be in the catbird seat regarding the investigation of Robert Kennedy.
These photos you're about to see are from Scott Enyart. He took these photos on the night of the assassination. The LAPD later confiscated these photos and refused to give them back. After 6 months, he got them back, but only got 26 out of 36 photos. He believed he didn't get the full set. Scott later learned that the LAPD destroyed 2,400 pieces of evidence and his photographs before the trial.
has been shot. They think Kennedy has been shot. It appeared to be gunshot. It seems like Robert Kennedy has been shot in a little room off to the side. I was near the senator. We heard what appeared to be gunshot coming from inside this room in here. It was mass chaos. You heard it as it happened. We don't know what has happened. It's mass chaos. Oh, someone else was shot. Someone else was shot. We have another person who was next to Kennedy who was shot in the forehead. She is bleeding badly. Another person was shot near Kennedy. It's mass chaos here. We did hear gunfire from in the hallway. There are people running everywhere. I know, he's all right. You sure? Yeah. Another lady was shot in the forehead.
The photo. They placed me in a car, took my camera from me, and told me that it was evidence and that they would have to have the film. They finally questioned me around 5:30, gave me my camera back without the film. And I asked them about when I would get my film back, and they told me that they'd contact me. They didn't contact me, and about 6 months later, I started asking, I called them, went down there and asked them about, having the rights to my own film. And they disavowed any knowledge of even knowing me. And finally, my father talked to his attorney, who located some people downtown. And about a year after I had taken them, I finally got a number of prints back, which I consider an incomplete set.
Did they give you negatives?
No, they gave me no film, and they told me that they would give me the film when they could, and they would contact me. I've contacted them, and they
verified by the California State Archives that my photographs, along with 2,400 other pieces of evidence, had been destroyed by the LAPD 3 weeks before Sirhan's trial.
During the assassination, Scott Enyart was standing behind Kennedy and his bodyguard. His missing shots likely revealed everything that transpired.
So why would Sirhan do this? MK Ultra. Sirhan was working as a horse trainer for one day. He got concussed after he fell off his horse. Sirhan said he stayed at the Pasadena hospital for 3 months. His appeals attorney visited the hospital, and records indicate that he stayed there for only 1 hour. Sirhan says others from the track were also there, bandaged up after the fall. Everyone who knew Sirhan said he was different. After the fall, Sirhan's brother said he started getting letters from the ancient mystical order of Rosicrucian and started hypnotizing himself. Sirhan disappeared 3 months before the assassination. Also, Roselli, Johnny Roselli, owned part of the track, who had ties to Robert Mayhew, which suggests Mayhew got Roselli to pick out a candidate at the horse track, and Sirhan was the perfect one.
Sidetracked him from that to go to horse racing.
In 1966, Sirhan left home to work as a stable boy and trained to be a jockey, but a few months later a nasty fall ended his career before it started.
He was working a horse, and due to the fog, it bucked him into the railing, and he had a severe injury to the head. And he wasn't the same afterwards. He was a little shaky. I don't know how to describe it. But he just wasn't himself. He was a little aloof and a little more tense and what have you. And
track, they were the stable boys and the walker. He was a walker. He'd never been on a horse before. And the trainers were all experimenting with hypnosis on their lunch breaks, their different breaks. So they were all, hypnotizing each other. And, who knows what happened? Maybe it was a screening, issue there. But I'll just tell you one other interesting fact. You mentioned MK Ultra. Well, one of the hospitals that apparently was used, MK Ultra was, I think it was a naval base. There was naval infirmary in Pasadena. One day they said to Sirhan, we want you to get on the horse. He'd never been on any horse, and they were going to put him on a thoroughbred and have him race around a quarter-mile track. Obviously, he falls off. He hits his head on the rail. He's brought to the Pasadena hospital.
Get the fuck out of here.
And his memory is that he stayed in that hospital for 3 months. But when his appeals attorney went to the hospital and got his records, it said he got 4 stitches and was discharged in an hour.
Wow.
And he has very vivid memories of what took place in this hospital. He said there were other people from the track who were also there that had bandages on their heads.
He just wanted to be more or less by himself after that for some odd reason.
After the fall, Sirhan's interest in mysticism grew. He joined the mystical order of the Rosicrucians and took to hypnotizing himself in his room.
He had a fish weight hanging from the light in his room, and I asked him what that was all about, and he said it has something to do with his mystical powers, so to speak. Once in a while he'd get mail, from the Rosicrucians, and Mom would ask him what that was all about, and wouldn't he laugh.
Also, Grant Cooper, Sirhan's lawyer, also had ties to Johnny Roselli, further proof of the case for conspiracy. Sirhan was known as the easiest type of person to hypnotize. Psychiatrist Bernard Diamond hypnotized Sirhan, and he told him to start climbing on the bars under hypnosis, and so he was handed this. Bernard Diamond was a very shady UCLA professor, and many believe was one of the main MK-Ultra hypnotizers for CIA. Under hypnosis, Sirhan wrote the same things found in his note about RFK which was used in the trial. RFK must die, die, suggesting he wrote these in a hypnotic trance. These writings are eerily similar to what was found in his home. Dr. William Bryan, a CIA hypnotist, claimed he could brainwash a person to do basically anything. He allegedly bragged about programming Sirhan to 2 prostitutes, and Albert DeSalvo was also known to be deprogrammed by William Bryan. Sirhan's diary also mentions mind control.
The prosecution discovered a notebook in Sirhan's room that contained repetitious incantations of the phrase, RFK must die or RFK must be assassinated, up and down the page. The prosecution was jubilant because it regarded this as a Rosetta Stone. Sirhan in trance, tell us more about Robert Kennedy. And Sirhan wrote out the phrase, RFK must die, die, RFK must die. The same kind of repetitious phraseology, indicating that the notebook was written in hypnotic trances.
William Bryan was, by his own admission, one of the primary researchers for the government in brainwashing, in hypnoprogramming, and in a variety of things. He was an out-of-control super hypno character who exploited women through his hypnosis practice and was temporarily disbarred as a result. He bragged about his work for the government, said he was the czar of brainwashing, and he was also involved with the man I call Reasoner and with another man, all of whom worked together in Southern and Northern California, all of whom worked for the government, and my belief is that 2 of them, if not 3 of them, had something to do with Sirhan's programming.
William Bryan was a rather large man, weighing 386 pounds. He has been variously referred to as the most brilliant man in the field of hypnotism and as a, quote, misguided genius. His private practice involved sex therapy, and by his own admission, he frequently had sex with his female patients. Did William Bryan believe that a subject could be programmed to perform acts that were out of character? Let's listen.
You have to have the person locked up physically, and there is also the use of long-term hypnotic suggestion, probably drugs, whatever, and so on. Under these situations where you have all this going for you, yes, you can brainwash a person to do just about anything.
Did William Bryan have anything at all to do with Robert Kennedy's accused killer? Well, in the year before his death in 1976, Bryan reportedly bragged to 2 prostitutes who serviced him regularly that he had, in fact, hypnotized Sirhan. Bryan also liked to brag about his most crowning achievement, the deprogramming of Albert DeSalvo, the Boston Strangler. In Sirhan's notebook, that strange document with page after page of almost indecipherable trance-induced scribbling, there appears the entry, God help me, please help me. Salvo, di DeSalvo, die salvo. It's a curious notation to be sure, but is it possible that while working upon Sirhan, the programmer couldn't help talking about his favorite subject? And that this entry, by way of the captured mind of Sirhan Sirhan, is really the palm print of Dr. William Bryan?
That Sirhan demonstrated from the very beginning to this very day suggests strongly that he was A, highly hypnotizable, and B, programmed to perform that act.
Bernard Diamond placed him under hypnosis and discovered that this was very easy. He simply held up a quarter in front of Sirhan's face, and Sirhan went right into a trance, indicating to Dr. Diamond that Sirhan was an excellent subject and had been programmed before and was experienced with hypnosis.
Sirhan remembers the events just prior to the shooting and just after his capture, but claims to have a lapse in memory during the actual shooting.
Do you remember drinking coffee? I remember being around the coffee. You don't remember anything at all after that? What do you remember when you got back and after you've had some coffee? I was choking like a son of a bitch. Choking? I was choking. Choking on what?
Sirhan, easily manipulated through hypnotic techniques and possibly drugged, might have been an easy target for such conspiracy. His behavior after the arrest was strange, as if he was in a trance. He was described by witnesses having an empty look, almost as if he was devoid of emotion and awareness of his surroundings. This is consistent with reports of individuals under deep hypnosis. The possible involvement of CIA and other intelligence agencies cannot be dismissed. The chaotic political climate of the 1960s, marked by the assassinations of major political figures such as RFK, JFK, and MLK. The CIA, known for its covert operations and psychological experiments, had the means and motive to conduct such an operation. Sirhan couldn't have shot Robert F. Kennedy. It was Thane Caesar. He was in the perfect position, had the perfect ties, and the perfect clearance for everything. The CIA agent working under the guise of Robert Mayhew was involved in the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. My conclusion is that Eugene Thane Caesar fired the fatal shot that killed Robert F. Kennedy. He was working under the guise of Robert Mayhew, who colluded with the CIA to get an MK-Ultra expert to hypnotize Sirhan Sirhan. The person who led Sirhan to that ambassador was the polka-dot dress girl, and she was likely further involved. The CIA and LAPD conspired to cover up the assassination and didn't show the full picture.
What has violence ever accomplished? What has it ever created? No martyr's cause has ever been stilled by an assassin's bullet. No wrongs have ever been righted by riots and civil disorders. A sniper is only a coward, not a hero. And an uncontrolled or uncontrollable mob is only the voice of madness, not the voice of the people. Among free men, said Abraham Lincoln, there can be no successful appeal from the ballot to the bullet. And those who take such appeal are sure to lose their case and pay the cost. Violence breeds violence. Repression breeds retaliation. And only a cleansing of our whole society can remove this sickness from our souls. For there is another kind of violence, slower, but just as deadly destructive as the shot or the bomb in the night. This is the violence of institutions, indifference, inaction, and decay. This is the violence that afflicts the poor, that poisons relations between men because their skin has different colors. This is the slow destruction of a child by hunger, and schools without books, and homes without heat in the winter. This is the breaking of a man's spirit by denying him the chance to stand as a father and as a man amongst other men. But we can perhaps remember, if only for a time, that those who live with us are our brothers, and surely we can begin to work a little harder to bind up the wounds among us and to become in our hearts brothers and countrymen once again.